I never thought I'd be the one on a gurney, clutching my belly like it was trying to claw its way out. Former chief surgeon, emphasis on former, means I know the smell of betadine, the sound of an overworked ultrasound, the rhythm of a real emergency. That night, the rhythm was all wrong. The pain didn't come in waves, it corkscrewed, tight and mean, until my teeth chattered between breaths. Triage said 20 minutes. 20 minutes stretched into the kind of time that unthreads sanity. A resident hustled past, double-gloved, calling for a crash cart for someone else. I tried to sit taller, to look less like a crumpled paper cup. Please, I said. Severe abdominal pain, sudden onset, vomiting, rebound tenderness. My voice refused to act sick. Old habit. Enter Dr. Kemp, white coat, bleached smile, the kind of confidence you can hear even when he isn't talking. He skimmed my chart like it was a spam email. Vitals pretty stable, he announced to no one. You'll be fine with fluids and rest. He didn't look at me when he said it, he looked over me, like I was a display model blocking the real merchandise. Something's wrong, I told him, fighting another spasm. Colicky, migrating, I feel a twist. I need imaging. At least labs. Lactate. He actually laughed. Not a belly laugh, something more efficient, like a stapler. You surgeons, he said. You read one journal and diagnose yourselves. Hysteria with a dash of charlatanism. He snapped off his glove, tossed it perfectly into the bin, missed, didn't notice. We'll reassess in a few hours. A few hours. I tasted copper. I'd taught med students to respect pain like it was a smoke alarm. He was treating mine like a scented candle. The unexpected thing about being dismissed is how fast the room shrinks. The fluorescent lights got icy. Someone changed the TV to a cooking show that shouted about boiling pasta while my gut felt like it was boiling me. My phone buzzed with a message from my sister, "You okay?" I typed DR. Bad. Autocorrect made it BR Dad. I didn't fix it. Another spasm stole my grammar. Then a nurse with a sunflower badge drifted in like Mercy with a pulse. Dr. Thompson, she whispered, like my old title might shatter. She slid a hand under my wrist, checked my pulse, frowned. You're tacky. How long since onset? 2 hours. Maybe 3. Time's dumb. I dared a breath. Feels like volvulus. Her eyes flicked to the hallway. He charted anxiety. She said it like a confession. I'm going to page Dr. Alvarez. Dr. Alvarez appeared mid-flicker, curls pinned back, expression sharp enough to cut gauze. Lily? She squeezed my shoulder once, brief, human. Where is your pain now? Everywhere, I said, and then, quieter, right lower quadrant, radiating. Nausea. No gas since noon. She pressed, watched me nearly levitate, stopped. Get lactate, CBC, CMP, type and screen, stat CT with contrast, she told the sunflower nurse. And hang fluids now. From the hallway, Kemp's voice, we're wasting resources. Alvarez didn't turn. We're saving a life. The next twist felt like a door locking from the inside. I tasted bile. I must have said something that sounded like a prayer, because the nurse squeezed my hand and said, I've got you. The force sang cold. The scanner was down, just for a minute, because of the power hiccup, of course it was. Minutes became knife edges. Alvarez ordered a bedside ultrasound anyway, searching shadows for truth. My world narrowed to the probe, the screen, the hiss of my own breath. Prep the oar, she said suddenly. We're not waiting. They wheeled me toward the oar, but it wasn't smooth. The corridor was clogged with stretchers, visiting families pressed to the walls, a janitor arguing with a broken mop bucket. Every bump against the gurney felt like someone grinding glass into my belly. Alvarez kept pace, barking orders like a general on borrowed time. Get anesthesia down here. Call for the surgical suite, no, not 2, it's occupied. 3. Now. Her voice cut through the din, but there was a counterpoint, Kemp's lazy drawl, following us like a shadow. "She's exaggerating," he said, just loud enough. Classic surgeon's ego. "Can't be the patient for once. You open her up, you'll find nothing." Alvarez stopped so suddenly my gurney jolted. She turned, eyes like scalpels. "If I'm wrong, you can add it to my record. If you're wrong, she dies. Which outcome do you prefer to live with?" For a second, the hallway went silent, even the janitor staring. Kemp smirked and walked away, muttering something about hysterical women backing each other up. The anesthesia resident arrived breathless, pulling on gloves. "What's the urgency?" "Probable volvulus," Alvarez said. "Severe ischemic risk. We don't have the luxury of proving it on film. We're going in." The world tilted then, literally. Another spasm tore through me, and I dry heaved into a basin someone shoved at me just in time. The resident's face went pale. He didn't need convincing anymore. Inside the OR, the smell of antiseptic almost felt like home. Almost. The gown, the mask, the lights, it was a cruel parody of all the times I'd stood on the other side, calm, capable, commanding. Now I was flat on the table, shaking, stripped of titles and dignity, waiting for strangers to put me under. "Do you consent, Dr. Thompson?" Alvarez asked, formal but gentle. "Yes," I rasped. "Please." The mask descended. Oxygen hissed. My last coherent thought before sliding under was that I should have written a living will more clearly, because what if Kemp somehow ended up dictating the notes? When I woke, the room was a blur of beeping and whispers. My mouth was desert dry. Pain was still there, but different, cleaner, edged, surgical. A nurse leaned close. "You made it through. Twisted small intestine. Necrotic section resected. You're lucky." Alvarez appeared, scrubs flecked, exhaustion painted across her face but steady as ever. "You were right," she said softly. Another hour, and it would have been too late. Relief was a strange thing, sweet but threaded with fury. Fury at Kemp, at the system that gave his dismissal more weight than my screams, at the irony that being a woman in medicine hadn't shielded me from the very bias I'd lectured about. Then came the twist I didn't expect. 2 nurses slipped in after Alvarez left, eyes darting like conspirators. The sunflower badge one spoke first. "We heard what he said about you. About women. About patients faking it. We're willing to testify if it comes to that." The other nodded fiercely. "He does this a lot. Not just to you. He ignores women, downplays their pain. We've seen it. We're done staying quiet." Their words burned hotter than morphine. Suddenly, this wasn't just my fight for survival, it was a reckoning waiting to happen. And the hospital had no idea the fire it had just lit. Word travels fast in a hospital. By morning, I was already the hysterical ex-chief who'd gotten herself cut open for nothing, depending on who you asked. Kemp's voice carried down hallways like static on a radio, dismissing me, sneering at Alvarez for wasting her time. He said I'd manipulated her, played the victim card. But then the countercurrent started. Nurses with clipped steps and clipped words came by, checking vitals longer than necessary, whispering stories. A resident leaned in while pretending to adjust my fore. He once refused a pelvic exam on a woman with internal bleeding. Called it cramps. She nearly coded before someone else caught it. Another night, a nurse with tired eyes murmured, he told a teenage patient to stop being dramatic, turned out she had appendicitis. Nearly ruptured. And yet, no one had ever said anything out loud. Because Kemp wasn't just arrogant, he was protected. Years in the system, friends in administration, the kind of reputation that bullied truth into silence. Then came the curveball. My sister stormed in on day 2. She was fire in human form, heels clacking against linoleum, waving the mangled text I'd sent her, ER. Bad. She had thought it meant Dad was in the bathroom, then panicked when I didn't reply. When she learned what had actually happened, she nearly tore the door off its hinges. "I'm calling a lawyer," she hissed, sitting beside me. "He left you to die. That's attempted manslaughter in my book." I tried to calm her. "Hospitals eat complaints for breakfast. They'll protect him." She jabbed a finger at my foreline. "Not if we make it public. Not if we make noise." I should have dismissed her, but then the sunflower badge nurse returned, bolder this time. She'd overheard my sister's fury and nodded. "Noise is good. We're tired of whispers. We'll stand with you." By day 3, Alvarez came to check my sutures. She lingered after, glancing at the closed curtain. "You know, this isn't the first time I've clashed with Kemp. Every time, admin sides with him. But now, you survived because I intervened. That gives us leverage. If you're willing." "Leverage for what?" I asked, though the answer quailed in my gut like a second surgery. "Change." I had been the patient dismissed as hysterical. I had lived to tell it. And if others hadn't, their silence deserved an echo in my voice. But I didn't know yet just how ugly the hospital would get once I started pulling at the threads. By the time I was discharged, the hospital felt less like a place of healing and more like a hive buzzing with tension. I left in a wheelchair, sutures tight and dignity looser than my hospital gown, but I could feel the eyes on me, staff glancing up, then down, like I was radioactive. Survivors make people uncomfortable, especially when survival exposes cracks in the system. My sister had turned my dining room into a war room, papers scattered, sticky notes on the wall, her laptop glowing with legal research. She had even printed out a photo of Kemp from the hospital's website and slapped it in the middle, like a wanted poster. "This isn't just malpractice," she insisted, tapping her nails against the table. "It's discrimination. Repeated. Patterned. You can't ignore that." I wanted to argue, but the sunflower badge nurse called that night. Her real name was Emma. She sounded nervous, voice shaking over the line. "They're already circling the wagons," she whispered. "Kemp told admin you were confused from meds and that Alvarez overstepped protocols. They're writing it up as a professional dispute, not a patient safety issue." My stomach dropped. That was their strategy: reduce it to egos, make it about clashing doctors instead of near-fatal negligence. If they succeeded, my pain would be chalked up to nothing but medical disagreement. Emma hesitated before continuing. "But, some of us are ready to give statements. Residents, too. We've seen too much. We just need someone to lead." Lead. The word sat heavy on me. I hadn't been chief in years, but the expectation felt familiar, like an old coat I thought I'd burned. The next morning, I received an email from Alvarez herself. "Lily, I've filed an incident report. It won't go far unless others back it up. Administration is already calling me emotional. But if we rally staff testimonies, they'll have to open a formal investigation." I stared at the screen, remembering Kemp's smirk, the word hysterical curling out of his mouth like poison. Emotional. Hysterical. Their favorite vocabulary for women who refuse to be quiet. I agreed. And that's when things started moving faster than I expected. Within a week, Emma organized a small, secret meeting in the hospital cafeteria after hours. We sat in a corner under buzzing fluorescent lights, a mismatched group of nurses, residents, even a janitor who had overheard too much over the years. One by one, they shared their stories, ignored chest pains, dismissed seizures, misdiagnosed hemorrhages, all brushed off by Kemp with the same contempt. Each story was a gut punch, but also a strange relief. I wasn't alone. Then came the twist. Midway through the meeting, one of the residents' phones buzzed. She glanced at it, then paled. "He knows we're here," she whispered. "Kemp. He just texted me, careful who you side with. Careers end fast in this business." The air went cold. Emma's hands trembled around her coffee cup. I realized then that we weren't just fighting for my story to be heard, we were fighting against a man who knew how to wield power like a scalpel. And he had every intention of cutting us down before we could stitch together the truth. The next few weeks were a blur of paperwork, whispered phone calls, and adrenaline spikes every time an unfamiliar number lit up my phone. I was back at home, technically recovering, but my incision wasn't the only wound. Every time I moved too fast, pain shot through my abdomen. Every time I thought too long, anger shot through my chest. Emma kept me updated. "We have 6 nurses and 3 residents willing to testify," she told me one night over speakerphone. "But they're scared. Kemp's been hinting that he'll tank evaluations, block recommendations. And you know he can." I did. Medicine is a hierarchy built on fear as much as knowledge. One bad word from the wrong attending and your career flatlines. I'd played that system from the inside. Now I was seeing how merciless it looked from the outside. Then Alvarez visited me at home, looking like she hadn't slept in days. She dropped a stack of manila folders on my table. "Internal morbidity and mortality reports," she said. I pulled the ones with his name. "Look." I flipped through pages of sanitized language, delayed intervention, insufficient documentation, patient deterioration not immediately addressed. Again and again, the same attending, Kemp. He'd buried his mistakes under the language of complex cases, the way only a seasoned physician knew how. But there was a catch. "These aren't enough," Alvarez warned. "They'll argue complications are part of medicine. What we need is proof of bias. Discrimination. The way he treats patients, and colleagues, differently based on gender." That's when my sister, who had been quiet for once, scrolling furiously on her phone, looked up. "What if I told you there's a recording?" Both Alvarez and I froze. She grinned like a cat who'd cornered a mouse. "Remember when I stormed into your room? I left my phone recording in my bag. Picked up everything for 20 minutes. Including him calling you hysterical in the hallway." My jaw dropped. Alvarez's eyes widened. Lily, that's gold." But the high didn't last long. 2 days later, I received a letter in the mail, a formal notice from the hospital's legal department. They were reviewing concerns regarding recent allegations and reminded me of confidentiality agreements signed during my tenure. In short, a warning shot. And then, the real curveball, Emma texted me at midnight. "Kemp knows about the recording. Someone leaked. Be careful." I stared at the glowing screen, heart pounding. If he knew, it meant someone in our circle wasn't really in our circle. A leak. A traitor. Suddenly, the fight wasn't just about justice anymore, it was about survival. Professional, reputational, maybe even personal. Because Kemp wasn't going to wait for the hospital board to decide. First came the article in the hospital's internal newsletter, "The Dangers of False Accusations in Medicine." No names were mentioned, but everyone knew. The timing, the tone, the phrases about emotional overreactions, it was a scalpel directed straight at me. Then, patients I'd once treated started calling my sister, confused. Somehow, rumors were circulating that I had botched surgeries in my tenure as chief, that I'd overstepped protocols and endangered lives. None of it was true, but in medicine, reputations rot faster than fruit once the first bruise shows. Alvarez stormed into my living room one night, slamming her bag on the floor. "He's filing counter-complaints against me. Says I recklessly bypassed standard imaging protocols to rush you into surgery. Claims I let personal bias cloud my judgment." My sister nearly threw her coffee mug against the wall. Unbelievable. He abandons a patient, almost kills her, and when someone saves her, suddenly she's the reckless one? But the worst blow came from inside our circle. One of the residents who had sat with us in that cafeteria, trembling as she recounted how Kemp ignored her patient's seizure, suddenly retracted everything. She emailed Emma, apologizing, saying she'd been mistaken and overly emotional. A day later, she posted smiling photos with Kemp on her social media, captioned, "Grateful for my mentors." Emma's text was short, "We've got a mole." It gutted me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying Kemp's sneer in my head. Around 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A blocked number. I answered, half asleep. Dr. Thompson, a man's voice drawled. Kemp. You should let this go. You've had your surgery, you're alive. Isn't that enough? Because if you keep pushing, well, I'd hate for more of your past mistakes to come to light. It wasn't just a threat. It was a promise. I sat frozen long after the line went dead. My past wasn't spotless, no surgeon's is. Complications happen, outcomes fail, even when you do everything right. But he was going to dig until he found something he could twist into a weapon. The next morning, I confessed the call to Alvarez and Emma. He's coming after me personally, I said. My voice cracked, the first time I'd let fear leak through. Alvarez leaned forward, eyes blazing. Then we don't just defend. We go on the offensive. We hit him with every testimony, every report, every shred of that recording. And we do it publicly. No more whispers. Emma nodded, though her hands trembled. If we stay hidden, he wins. If we shine a light, maybe, just maybe, he burns. It was terrifying. But in that moment, with my allies' faces fierce under the weight of it all, I realized something. This wasn't just about me surviving anymore. This was about everyone who hadn't. The decision to go public felt like stepping off a cliff with no parachute. My sister was the one who gave us the push. I've already drafted a statement, she announced one morning, sliding her laptop across the table. Press, social media, medical boards. The whole world is going to hear what he did to you. I hesitated. But then Emma texted me, 2 former patients' families want to talk. They think their loved ones died because of his negligence. That text sealed it. We set up a meeting in a small church basement, neutral ground, no chance of hospital administration dropping by. The air smelled of old hymnals and coffee. Folding chairs squeaked as we arranged them in a circle. 2 families arrived. One woman, gray hair pulled tight, carried a photo of her daughter, mid-20s, vibrant smile, gone after Kemp dismissed her chest pain as anxiety. The other, a father with hands like stone, told us about his wife, who'd bled internally for hours while Kemp charted her complaints as exaggerated. Both stories cracked something open inside me. Their grief was raw, but beneath it was fury. We'll testify, the father said. We've stayed quiet too long. I realized then, Kemp had underestimated the power of ghosts. He thought silenced patients stayed buried. But their families carried their voices, and now those voices were joining ours. The unexpected twist came the next day. A package arrived at my doorstep with no return address. Inside was a flash drive and a note scrawled on hospital stationery, "You don't know me, but I know him. Play this at your own risk." My sister nearly ripped the drive out of my hands to plug it in. On screen appeared grainy security footage, Kemp in the staff lounge, bragging to another physician. His voice was crystal clear. Half these women aren't even sick. They cry a little, and everyone panics. I save the real resources for the patients who actually matter. The other doctor laughed nervously. Kemp leaned back, smug. And if 1 or 2 slip through the cracks? That's medicine. Not my fault they can't handle pain. I sat frozen, bile rising in my throat. Proof. Ugly, undeniable proof. That night, Alvarez called. I could hear exhaustion and determination braided in her voice. Lily, if we release this, it won't just be an internal investigation anymore. It'll be a scandal. Are you ready for that? I looked at the scar on my stomach, red and angry against my skin. I almost died because he didn't care. If this burns him, then let it burn. The day we went public, the air felt electric, like the whole city was holding its breath. My sister hit publish on the statement we drafted, my near death, Kemp's contemptuous words, the testimonies from staff, the leaked video. Within hours, it spread like wildfire, picked up by local reporters, then national outlets. Hashtags bloomed, hashtag listen to patients, hashtag gaslighting ignored, hashtag justice for Lily. For a brief moment, it felt empowering. My phone lit up nonstop with messages, other patients, doctors, even strangers who'd been dismissed by the medical system, pouring out their own horror stories. The solidarity was overwhelming. But then the backlash came, sharp and vicious. Kemp issued a statement through his lawyer, calling me a disgruntled former employee with a personal vendetta. He claimed Alvarez had manipulated my fragile emotional state and that the video was taken out of context. On cue, a handful of his loyal colleagues appeared on social media, parroting the same line, brilliant physician. Dedicated to his patients. Victim of a smear campaign. Then, the smear campaign against me began. Anonymous posts on medical forums accused me of botched surgeries, of bullying residents, of being unfit for leadership when I'd been chief. One even suggested my abdominal pain had been psychosomatic all along, that Alvarez had performed unnecessary surgery to score points against a rival. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. Lying in bed at night, staring at the ceiling, I started questioning myself. Had I been too reckless, too loud? But every time doubt crept in, someone else's story landed in my inbox. A teenager ignored when she begged for help with ovarian torsion. A woman told her shortness of breath was just anxiety, she later found out it was pulmonary embolism. A new mother whose postpartum hemorrhage was brushed off until she collapsed. Then the firestorm reached the hospital itself. Protesters gathered outside with signs, "Patients aren't hysterical" and "End gaslighting," and Kemp. During one of those protests a man stepped forward, holding a megaphone. He introduced himself as Dr. Patel, a retired cardiologist. And then, in front of cameras, he said, "Kemp ignored my wife's pain until it was too late. She's buried because of him." I stayed silent out of fear and shame. Not anymore. The crowd went silent, then roared. Another ghost had spoken, this time from someone with authority the hospital couldn't dismiss. And the hospital's walls were starting to crack. The hospital board could only ignore the inferno for so long. By the time national media had camped outside the main entrance, they were cornered. They announced an independent investigation, though everyone knew they were just scrambling to salvage their reputation. Emma texted me updates constantly, "They've started interviewing nurses. People are nervous, but they're talking." Then another, "Kemp looks rattled. He's been yelling in the staff lounge." One morning, a thick envelope slid under my front door. Inside, photocopies of old surgical records from my time as chief. Cases with complications, outcomes that hadn't gone well. Every surgeon has them, no one is spotless, but Kemp had highlighted every grim detail in red ink, scrawling negligence in the margins. A note was paper-clipped on top, "If I fall, you fall too." My sister nearly tore the pages in half. "He's blackmailing you with your own medical record? That's insane." It was insane. And it was working, at least in my head. I lay awake for hours, thinking about those patients, those families, and how Kemp might twist my failures into weapons. The doubt chewed at me. But then came an unexpected lifeline. Alvarez marched into my living room, fire in her eyes, holding a folder. "You're not alone in having complications," she said, dropping it on the table. "These are his." I opened it, and my breath caught. His record was worse than mine, pages of delayed diagnosis, failure to escalate, patient deterioration. Buried, minimized, hidden under jargon. "You've carried guilt," Alvarez said. "The difference is, you learned from it." He weaponized his. It felt like a release valve in my chest. Maybe I wasn't spotless, but I wasn't him. The investigation interviews grew louder, fiercer. Nurses openly told stories of being dismissed. Residents described being humiliated when they questioned his judgment. Families stepped forward with photos, with timelines, with grief so sharp it cut through the board's scripted responses. Then, the twist that broke everything wide open, Emma called me, breathless. They found something. The IT department dug into his electronic charting. He altered records. After patients deteriorated, he went back and edited notes to make it look like he'd acted sooner. There's timestamps. Digital proof. I sat stunned, phone pressed to my ear. Falsifying records was the cardinal sin in medicine. A doctor could survive arrogance, negligence, even whispered malpractice. But falsifying records? That was career death. News outlets reported the discovery within hours. Protesters doubled in size. The hospital board couldn't contain it anymore. They suspended Kemp pending investigation. He was escorted out of the building in broad daylight, cameras capturing every second. His smirk was gone, replaced with the pale face of a man who'd finally lost control. And for the first time, I dared to believe the ending might actually be happy. Kemp's suspension should have felt like the finale, but in truth, it was only the beginning of the rebuilding. His name was stripped from the hospital directory, his office cleared out under the watch of security. The staff group chat lit up with screenshots. One nurse had captured the exact moment he was escorted past the front desk, expression blank, hands trembling. For the first time, the smirk was gone. The investigation wrapped 2 months later with a verdict: gross negligence, abuse of authority, and falsification of medical records. Kemp's license was revoked, his career in ashes. But what mattered more were the reforms that followed. The board, desperate to salvage their reputation, announced sweeping changes. Mandatory bias training for all staff, with annual refreshers. A patient advocacy program, where concerns could bypass the chain of command and go directly to an independent review. Anonymous reporting systems for nurses and residents, protected by whistleblower policies. A new charter that explicitly recognized discrimination, dismissal of pain, and gaslighting as forms of malpractice. It wasn't perfect. No reform ever is. But it was a start. And then, the most unexpected twist of all, I was invited back. Not as a surgeon, I couldn't face the OR again after nearly dying on the table, but as a consultant, helping design the very programs that would protect future patients. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had been dismissed as hysterical, a charlatan, someone not worth examining. Now, my voice was the one shaping policy. Emma and Alvarez became the faces of change within the hospital. Emma, once terrified to speak up, was promoted to charge nurse, her sunflower badge replaced with a leadership pin. Alvarez was named head of a new patient safety and advocacy committee. My sister, naturally, still reminded everyone it was her fury that had kicked this off in the first place. The families of Kemp's victims came to the hospital courtyard for a memorial service. Photos lined the fountain, candles flickering in the evening air. We stood together, nurses, residents, grieving families, former patients. Ghosts were given names, stories, dignity. Their silence finally had an echo. As for me, I still carry the scar. Some mornings, it tugs when I bend wrong, a reminder of the night I was nearly erased. But I've learned to see it differently now, not as a wound, but as proof. Proof that survival isn't passive. Proof that one injustice can ignite change if people are brave enough to speak, to testify, to stand together. The hospital halls are different now. Not perfect, not healed, but different. Patients' voices echo louder. Nurses no longer lower theirs. Residents walk a little taller, knowing they aren't alone.